Hello. The last video about the falling of boulders in Repton 3 and Repton Infinity got a few comments, and one of the comments was about how I kind of missed out the Lost Realms. Now, I haven't shown the Lost Realms on my channel before, but I have played all of the levels, and I do intend to actually make proper videos of the levels in the Lost Realms, and I've made some of my own levels of the Lost Realms, which I intend to look through as well, but give me time to get to that, because I have to remember how to do all the levels, then do all the levels, then record all the... Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. But at some point I'm looking to actually do that. But I haven't shown you this before, but it doesn't really matter because most of the things I'm going to show in this video, i.e. boulders, they don't change really, apart from they do change, and I show you exactly why. I've made a similar setup to the previous thing here. You'll notice it's slightly different. That's because I kind of isolated this column that Repton's standing under. Also, the width of the screen is slightly wider in Lost Realms, so that's why you can fit more columns in if there were all the columns. Anyway, so what I shall show you is I shall do the same trick as I did before. Hold down and press space so that when it goes back to the game, it'll jump straight back to the map and hopefully progress one step, and we can see how it goes. Now what you'll notice here is that it doesn't quite do the same thing as last time. As many times as we press space here, it's just going to keep popping back to the map and not changing anything. So I thought, well, how can I actually force it to change something? So what I'm going to do is press either left or right, and then unpause it so that when the Repton's going to move, you'll see. So there we go. So that actually causes something to happen. Now you'll notice that this kind of follows more of a pattern which you kind of expect here, and you'll probably possibly also notice that 4 boulders from each column have, fallen down and piled up. So 4 is an important number here. You'll see that if I do this again, that 4 more boulders are going to fall down, and I'll just do it a few more times. And the reason why it's 4 is because I think that's how many frames it takes for Repton to move. So you can see they're all fallen down now. So what I'm going to do is take the transporter here and have a look at what we've got up here and try to demonstrate what the differences between the engines are. Now, Repton Infinity, we can look at the code for Repton Infinity, and we know exactly what's happening because it's in the Reptol language. So as I said, I kind of implemented a similar thing in my Claptraps game as well. So what happens, and the boulder falls down to like here, what I'll do is look below it first and see, aha, there's a solid thing below me, so I can't move down, but that thing below me has a flag on it which says it's curved to the left. So what it'll do then is look... Sorry, if you can hear noise in the background, that's a dog trying to look out the window. Anyhow, so what it'll do, it'll fall down here, check underneath it, see it's curved, then it'll check here and here to see if they're clear, or filled with a monster or something like that, which you can move into the space. And what it'll do then is it'll say, okay, move across. So for one frame it's here, for the next frame it's across here, and then it'll look below it, see a space and move down. And then a similar thing happens, it looks down, see a sort of thing, see that it's curved to the right, and say, okay, I'll check here and here. And then when it does that, it's saying, okay, that's clear, you can move, so it'll tell it to move left, and so it'll move left. So frame by frame, it's like frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, frame 5, frame 6, and so on like that. And that's why it kind of has that weird effect which you saw in the last video in the Repton Infinity example, where they're all stacked up. And I think this engine works slightly differently in that it scans from the bottom up rather than Repton Infinity, which I think scans from the top down. Does make a difference, because what happens in Repton Infinity, I think, at least from as much understanding of coding I have, and obviously I made a game, so I have some knowledge of coding. So what happens is the ones at the top here kind of look below them and see a boulder and see, oh, I can roll off to the left, so they roll to the left. Next one down in the column sees a boulder below it, says, oh, I can roll to the left, does that. So basically all the ones in that column shift across, apart from the bottom one, which sees that it can move across and down. Well, it still moves across, but the one right at the bottom is on the floor, it doesn't move anywhere. So the next time this stack that's above this boulder that's moved across does the same thing. Everything moves across apart from this one here, which now sees that it can move down, which so it does. And so that's where you get that kind of sweeping and falling effect in Reptile Infinity. Here in this engine, from obviously what I've just witnessed and what I've shown here, is that I think what happens is starts from the bottom and moves up. So it comes to a rock that's sitting on top of another rock like this, and it says, okay, check here and here. Obviously it checks below it to see if it's curved, then checks here and here, and it says, okay, I'll move here. So there's quite a difference. So in the Reptile Infinity example, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, like that. In this example, Reptile Lost Realms, you've got frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, so on. So obviously the boulders will fall down quicker because, you know, Reptile Infinity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 it takes to get down to there, and this one 1, 2, 3, 4 it takes to get down there. So that's what happens here, and what you'll notice is that when it falls down to, well, I can't show it on this part here. Let's see if there's anything that's kind of laid out nicely. No, I don't think there's any of these are laid out nicely enough for me to demonstrate the thing now. Ah, no, here it is. So what happens is the one boulder will fall down here, move across and fall down to where this boulder is, which I am kind of walking around at the moment. So the next one will come down here, see there's a boulder here, so what it'll do is fall down this side. And because working from the bottom up, these have settled down into this kind of way. It might actually be better just to restart the whole thing and then show you again, step by step. So here, if I move across and pause, you'll see that one of the boulders kind of moved off to the right, but I think the first boulder moved off to the left, and then the next one moved off to the right, and then the next one moved off to the left, and then that one can move down again, so it moved down again, and then the pile moved down. I can't point at things and show you, so it's harder to do it, but it does have like a logical, if you actually step through the fact, if you scan from the bottom upwards and say, okay, what would this boulder do, what would this boulder do, it all kind of makes sense as to where these boulders are actually falling. This is nice, this works really well. Obviously if you try walking here, it does move a little bit slow, because this is like Repton's normal kind of walking speed when there's nothing really lagging up the game. When these boulders are all falling, it's a bit slower. So yeah, it does obviously take a lot of computation to do it, but not, you know, overall too... Wrong way to restart, here we go. Not too bad. I mean, you can still kind of play it when it's kind of moving all the things around. I haven't, you know, done a similar test of the actual speed in Repton 3 and that. Actually, it's probably a good idea. Before I leave this screen, I just want to bring up the fact that this was programmed by somebody different to who programmed the Repton 3 engine. So we have, I think it's Paris Sidapara on there, and I think it's Tom Walker who picked up the code later on and just finished it off and such. So obviously they'd have more of an information on how it actually works, you know, internally than I do. But what I'll do is I'll just quickly load up Repton 3. I don't necessarily have to, or Repton Around the World, let's do that one instead, since I've got my levels there. What did I save it as? What, wasn't it? I think that's the one I want to use. Apologies for this. Hopefully this will work. I'm kind of using a different... Am I using a different emulator? I can't remember now. I think I might be. So hopefully this all works properly. I have had troubles with different emulators loading at different things. No, it can't find the file. Unfortunately not, so I can't show you that just at the moment. But what you can see from this screen here is that this engine was written by Matthew Atkinson, obviously all the way back in 1986, so I don't know if Matthew Atkinson is still around or not, but since this is quite a few years ago, they probably don't actually remember exactly what the code was like, even if we did ask them. So it's probably the actual first-hand knowledge is possibly lost to time, but we can obviously look over machine code, and yeah, I don't really know BBC Micro machine code all that well. I mean, I could start looking into it, but it would take time before I actually got an answer for that. So yeah, obviously the person who wrote the first Repton game was Tim Tyler. I'm not quite sure how the boulders behave in that game, because obviously there's no editor for that. I mean, you could probably go into the save file, just adjust all the bits and things like that, or bytes, or whatever is the optimal way for dealing with these things. But you go in and adjust the actual save file, and probably change the levels there to stack up a bunch of boulders to see how it all behaved. But yeah, it would be interesting to see how Repton 1 and Repton 2 actually behaved. We know how Repton 3 behaves. It's a bit weird. One thought I had about how Repton 3 behaves is actually that maybe it's working in sections and it's flattening the boulders out into a line so that they can actually stack up properly. Doesn't make too much sense, but perhaps that's kind of what I've kind of thought might actually be happening, so that they actually spread out properly and fall down as you might expect, rather than that Repton Infinity way of doing it. Also, if you look at the information on sorry, not looking at the information, look at the map. When I'm pausing it on the last video, you can kind of see there's a bit of a diagonal pattern going on. It starts on one column and goes up on the next column across the whole thing. You can kind of see a pattern diagonally, but it's not a perfect pattern, because sometimes it's not the same. It's just really confusing about what's exactly going on. I did write a couple of other notes here just to go through, just to try and make sure I've touched on all the points I wanted to touch on here. So what haven't I gone over? Yeah, maybe it's just a visual thing. Maybe all the boulders are moving, but it's not updating the information on the screen. But that doesn't really make any sense, because it's the same on the map as it is on the game screen, and yeah, that doesn't seem to actually make any sense, that it's just not updating the visuals as at the same time. We could possibly test it by putting some monsters on the map, see if they get crushed, putting some spirits on, see if they go around boulders which don't look like they're there. But that's hard, because obviously when you look at the map in Repton 3, you don't actually see the spirits or the monsters, so that's going to make it complicated. Obviously there is the thing that we could do a rigorous testing of all the horizontal positions across the screen of the boulders, see what happens for each one. I think at that point you're better off actually looking into the machine code to figure things out. And I wondered if would it behave differently with fewer boulders? Maybe, maybe not. It's hard to say. But that's pretty much all I wanted to go over here. Somebody also, somebody also kind of said that I should probably look into how fungus behaves and that, and we know already that fungus can behave a bit weirdly. If you remember my Repton 3 playthrough, I kind of was reminded of it because I was doing, looking at to do the speedrun thing for the Takata series of levels, and there's one level in there which, if you start from the start on the disc version, the fungus grows too much, so you can't actually complete the level, where if you start from the start on the tape version, it doesn't start growing, and so you can actually complete the level properly. And yeah, if you just restart the level, if you type in the password for the level and then go into it, the fungus doesn't grow in your way, and it's exactly how it figures out how to move, and that's possibly even more complicated, because it's not as obvious to what it should do, and that's but maybe I'll have a look into that to see, but it'll possibly take a little bit more research and that. But this was mainly just to kind of have a look over, and just to show something very curious that I had noticed in Repton 3 and such. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.